let's see. In Heart is kind of like just an... Now, that new... is almost... Oh my god. Yeah. And... damn it. You see... Yeah. Now... Alright, what... Yeah. It's getting worse. What is filmmaking? Now, I don't mean this as some existential question to which the answer is everything. I mean, really, what is your definition of filmmaking? How do you categorize things into film and not? Well, the first thing I did is look at the definition of filmmaking in the dictionary, to which it has filmmaking, the process of making a film. Okay, well, what's film? Film is the process, art, or business of making movies. So the dictionaries failed us. So it all comes down to personal opinion. And for me, I wrote it down. It's the art of visual storytelling, and more specifically, the art of involving the audience with the conflicts of the characters on screen by manipulating what can be seen and what can't. And that's really what it boils down to. And so by that definition, what qualifies as film? TV, yeah. Movies, anything you see on the big screen, of course. But let's think outside that spectrum a little bit. What about, if you go farther back in time, theater? That's where film originated from, kind of, right? Is that film? Not really, because film is all about framing. And if you don't have that framing of deciding what's in the scene and what's not in the scene, then it's not really film. I'm not saying it's inferior, it's just a different art. Now, if we go in the opposite direction of this time spectrum we've created, you start to get to animation. Now, animation has been around almost as long as film if you start talking about hand-drawn Mickey Mouse cartoons from the 20s and 30s. But what I'm talking about is computer-generated graphics. And a lot of people at first didn't really consider it film. And that's because there's no real actors, there's no real setting, there's no real framing. Everything is just created in the computer world, and for a lot of people that didn't really count. Now this new wave of animation for me is just a different way of telling the story. And animation is kind of unique in the fact that it doesn't have to follow the laws of physics. Now the stills that you're seeing are from a short animated film called Heart. And it's one of my favorite examples of how animation can be used to bend reality to really show the message. Now this one is pretty heavy-handed in its metaphors, but still really, really well done. Heart is an animated short where a lone being finds a red heart on the ground under an opposing tree-like structure. And the heart is the only thing of color in the short. Everything else is black and white. And everyone's obsession over this heart kind of develops throughout the animation and shows the themes of desire and ambition, which over the 8-minute short devolve into addiction and ultimately self-destruction. Now, as the owner of the heart fights off more and more people, he literally becomes more and more ragged looking. Eventually a huge battle breaks out, and in the end, the lone being ends up accidentally hanging himself on the tree structure that you can see in the first shot. Now, when he dies, the heart falls out of his hand onto the floor and repeats the same shot that you see in the beginning. That kind of symbolizes the whole process starting over again. Now, what I really like about Heart is that the simple clay characters work as great templates. As their internal struggle over this heart gets worse and worse, their physical facial structure gets worse and worse. Their bodies start to deform. And that's what animation really has to its advantage over film. It can bend and break these laws of reality to really get the message across. Now recently, animation has gained a lot of credibility as film, thanks in part to these big animation studios like Pixar that create these really quality animation movies. So what's the furthest boundary of film? What about video games? Now a lot of you are like, video games really as film? Okay, kind of. Now they're interactive, there's gameplay sequences which don't really follow the idea of film, but when you start thinking about the cutscenes in between and what really builds the story of the game, yeah, they don't really follow the most concrete definition of film. I do want to bring them up just briefly because of the negative stigma around them. Video games are not seen as art, and developers are not seen as artists, and I think that's actually a shame. When most people think of video games, they think of something like this, or something like this.
I don't give a f***, I'm gonna beat this little bitch.
Oh my god, sir.
Now, my favorite counterexample to that is a scene from The Last of Us. Last of Us is a game that came out in 2013, and in my opinion, it's one of the best examples of visual storytelling I've ever seen in animation. To give you a little context to the scene I'm going to show you from this, Ellie, the main character, is immune to a modern plague that sent the world into the game's post-apocalyptic setting. Now Ellie, a teenager, has been forced to grow up fast in this world, and currently she's being smuggled across the US by Joel, who's arranged for her to be taken the rest of the way by a safer, more powerful group. They've grown to care about each other, and that elephant in the room really makes this scene powerful, even with the light context. Check it out.
Is this really all they had to worry about? Boys, movies, deciding which shirt goes with which skirt. It's bizarre.
Get up. We're leaving. Come on.
And if I say no?
Do you even realize what your life means? Huh? Running off like that, putting yourself at risk? It's pretty goddamn stupid.
Well, I guess we're both disappointed with each other then.
What do you want from me?
Admit that you wanted to get rid of me the whole time.
Tommy knows this area
Oh,
better
fuck
than...
that.
Well, I'm sorry. I trust him better than I trust myself.
Stop with the bullshit. What are you so afraid of? That I'm gonna end up like Sam? I can't get infected. I can take care of myself.
How many close calls have we had?
Well, we seem to be doing all right so far.
And now you'll be doing even better with Tommy.
I'm not her, you know.
What?
Maria told me about Sarah.
Ellie?
And
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel. But I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
You're right. You're not my daughter. And I sure as hell ain't your dad. And we are going our separate ways. Get it together. We're not alone.
Now to me, that's the best example of the expansion of the definition of film. So now that we have a good sampling of filmmaking, the next question to ask is what makes filmmaking so powerful? To answer the question in short, film excels in immersion. What I mean by that is the whole art focuses around the manipulation of emotion and putting you in the shoes of the characters. Everything from lighting, sound design, makeup, music, writing, shot selection, acting, scene composition, it's all done for a reason and it all influences you consciously or subconsciously. Another reason filmmaking is so powerful is because it can and will lie all the time. Now, this is kind of a double-edged sword, of course, because it can be used to really enhance the storyline, or it can be used to mislead an audience. Now, Morgan Spurlock has a great TED Talk called The Greatest TED Talk Ever Sold, and in it he kind of examines how everything in film nowadays is an advertisement. Everything has an ulterior motive to sell and make a profit, and that's kind of ruining the art. Now, my favorite example of this is a terrible Subway plug in a Biggest Loser commercial.
I'm so pissed that I have to bring Sandra her lunch and serve it to her when it's like I know that she didn't win and she doesn't deserve that freaking sandwich. I was gonna get a cheeseburger, but that's that. Shocking that you followed through. It's killing me to have to do this. Yummy.
Now, as painfully obvious as this is in a lot of TV shows, one of the greatest examples of how lying can enhance a storyline is another TV show, Breaking Bad. Now, Breaking Bad might not be the best TV show ever, but I want to use it as an example because I feel like a lot of people have seen it and can relate to what I'm saying. The director of photography for Breaking Bad is Michael Slovis, and I think he's a genius. One of my favorite quotes from him is about the lighting in Breaking Bad, and it says, "I'm very, very concerned with the emotions of the story. I'm much less concerned with the reality of what the lighting would be or what the look would be at that particular moment or in that particular situation." Now, sure, the acting is great in Breaking Bad and the writing's top-notch, but the camera work is really what pushes it over the top. It's equally important, but often invisible. But its job is to capture the emotion of the scene, and it does that really, really well. Breaking Bad has some of the best cinematography in any show, and that's because the DP knows what he's doing. He understands that Breaking Bad is a fictional story, so realism isn't really of his concern. Instead, it's telling as powerful of a story as possible, and there are multiple ways that Slovis accomplishes this as DP. All the shots in Breaking Bad are carefully crafted and often carry a lot of symbolism and foreshadowing in the story. Slovis often puts the main antagonist, Gus, in the same shots in terms of both framing and lighting as the main character, Walt, in order to help the audience draw parallels between the two. And now filmmaking has become even more powerful because of its accessibility. Not 20 years ago you had to have a huge crew, a huge budget to produce anything of quality, but nowadays anyone with a little extra cash can produce something that looks good. Really quality gear is now relatively cheap, and these huge production crews that you needed beforehand can be cut down to next to nothing thanks to affordable VFX and editing softwares. Now it's easy to produce something of quality if you have the imagination and the talent to do it because the tools are readily accessible, and that's something that's really changed over the past 10 or 20 years. I can go from this documentary setup to a noir film with some on-set light changes, desaturation and high contrast in the editing software post-production, and a few sound effects and music files. Now this readable accessibility means two things for the film industry. One, you're going to find a lot of hidden talent, and two, you're going to find a lot of crap because anybody can put out anything.
I don't give a f***. I'm gonna beat this little
Oh my God.
So we have some examples of filmmaking and why it's powerful. Now we gotta ask why it's important to us and to society. Now for filmmaking, that's kind of a tough question because it's not something that people may think is really gonna change the world all that much. It might be entertaining, you forget about it, and you move on with your life. And the point I wanna use to argue that is, how often has your life been changed by a good documentary you've seen? Now I think documentary filmmaking is one of the more powerful forms of filmmaking because it's real. It can push real change by the things that you see. The most powerful example I can think of a documentary really promoting change recently is Blackfish. Now for those who haven't seen it, Blackfish is a documentary that follows the lives of these captive orcas that places like SeaWorld have taken in. And it really shows these companies like SeaWorld in a really scathing light. In the aftershock of this documentary being released, something that people are calling the Blackfish effect has started to happen, which is the overwhelming support for these whales to be freed and the dismantling of the companies like SeaWorld that have kept them. The Blackfish effect shows how one film can really make a big change in an entire nation. And the most hard statistic in support of this has got to be the stock of SeaWorld that's fallen from 30-something before the film was released to recently, I checked yesterday, to under 17. So it's been cut in half from the effect of this film. Now it's easy to say that these documentaries and the real change they promote in society has got to be the most important contribution that filmmaking has to offer. But another side that I want to look at is just entertainment. And a lot of people think that's shallow, but if you look at it really closely, it has a lot more to it. Film lets us experience things that are fantastic, things that we may not have the chance to do or experience, and in that way it feeds the universal human drive of curiosity. Is manipulating emotion grasping at low-hanging fruit, or is it a powerful expression of control for both the filmmakers and the viewers? Well, that's kind of up to you, but in the end it comes down to two things: meaning and empathy. Now in terms of meaning, how many films have you seen that have changed your outlook on life, if only briefly, especially the unpleasant ones? The ones that maybe you thought taught you lessons even though you didn't really experience anything. And what about empathy? How many times have you bonded with someone just based off of a movie reference that they get that shows that they have the same taste in humor that you do? For example, how many times have you seen a foreign film where you don't get what they're saying, but you get the emotion behind it and you're interested in the conflict and you can relate to the people, even though you don't know what language they're speaking? And in the end, I think that power of empathy is one of the greater things that film has to offer. Thanks for watching.